Hello then, good evening ladies and gentlemen, this is Al24 News, streaming live from the capital Algiers, and coming up next in our news program. Some troops in Russia's military districts adjacent to Ukraine are returning to their bases after completing drills, which it might be as a move that could de-escalate frictions between Moscow and the West. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has declared February 16 as Day of Unity, asking country's people to lift their national flag and wear ribbons of the same blue and yellow colors on the day to show their unity to the world. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says he's invoked emergency powers to try to quell the protests by truck drivers and others who have paralyzed Ottawa and blocked borders crossing in anger over the country's COVID restrictions. A public memorial took place in Auckland for the late John Madden, whose influence on the National Football League is arguably unmatched, and his wife Virginia Madden spoke for about 7 minutes at her late husband's Auckland Coliseum Memorial. Hello again and welcome to Al24 World Later. The Russian government has announced that Moscow is beginning to return troops at the Ukrainian border for their bases. From his part, Ukraine's president and Western officials have urged cautious over taking Russia's claims at face value. Nabil Khazini has more to clarify.
After several weeks of immense tension, Russia has shown what apparently appears to be the very first steps toward de-escalation. Moscow started to return some of its troops at the Ukrainian border to their bases, with the other troops currently engaged in military drills in neighboring Belarus to be brought back to their permanent bases when the exercises ended in 5 days.
The Russian armed forces are continuing a range of large-scale exercises for operational training of troops and forces. Another large-scale exercise in the region, the joint Russian-Belarusian Union Resolve War Games, is due to end on the 20th of February.
But despite Moscow signaling some military exercises were coming to an end, NATO sees no de-escalation on the ground from Russian forces near Ukraine.
Movement of forces, the movement of Russian capabilities doesn't represent real de-escalation.
In Kiev, Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba said joint diplomatic efforts with Western allies have managed to deter a feared Russian invasion.
We in Ukraine have a rule. We don't believe what we hear, we believe what we see. If a real withdrawal follows these statements, we will believe in the beginning of a real de-escalation.
It is worth mentioning that in March and April 2021, Russia started to mass thousands of military personnel and equipment near its borders with Ukraine, representing the highest force mobilization since the country's annexation of Crimea in 2014. In October and November 2021, the crisis was renewed when over 100,000 Russian troops were again massed near the border by December. This has set off alarm bells for months in the West, while the Russian government has always maintained the buildup poses no threat to Ukraine and that its troops would return to their bases after carrying out what Moscow insists are just military exercises.
In the same line of thought, after his visit to Kiev, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz arrived in Moscow today to meet President Vladimir Putin in a high-stakes mission to avert war, saying he will hammer home the message from the West that they are open to dialogue about Russia's security concerns, emphasizing on the idea that they will impose sanctions if Russia invades Ukraine. Islam Sidon Watfolo.
After visiting the Ukrainian capital Kiev, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz meets the Russian President Vladimir Putin in Moscow on Tuesday. The German Chancellor's visit comes as an effort to prevent possible invasion as the Kremlin masses troops and conducts threatening military exercises at Ukraine's borders.
It is clear that we must talk about the difficult security situation in Europe. As you have already done with my French colleague, I am glad that is now possible to discuss, because the most important thing is to work on relations between states through good discussions.
During his visit, Scholz has said the West is open to dialogue to discuss Russia's security concerns and warns that severe sanctions will be imposed if the invasion happens. It's worth mentioning that his visit comes after comments made by the NATO members, including the UK and the US, emphasized on a room for diplomacy with Russia, calling the latter to take back its threats toward Ukraine. However, Russia denies it is planning to invade, accusing the West of hysteria. On the other hand, Mr. Scholz's trip to the Kremlin on Tuesday shows that Germany is Russia's top trading partner in Europe and also the biggest consumer of its natural gas.
We are ready to continue working together. We are ready to embark on the path of negotiations. But all problems, as mentioned above, must be considered as a whole.
However, Europe's reliance on gas imports from Russia could mean the German leader has limited room for holding effective talks, in which it is seen as an irrelevant time for a nation still dependent on Russian gas could maneuver talks.
And now for more clarification over the hot potato nowadays within the European continent, joining me live via Skype, the lawyer and international relations analyst, Professor Ismail Khalfallah. Professor Ismail, hello there and welcome. Ustad Ismail, several diplomats' efforts were made to de-escalate tensions in Ukraine. Do you think, Professor, that diplomacy had the effect of stopping a possible Russian invasion of Ukraine or not?
Invasion to Ukraine till now. It is really clear that in this crisis, all the papers are used to de-escalate. There is tension from everywhere, and the case there is tension, and it's clear that military escalation is here, and all the visits and papers, diplomatic papers, are used, and Moscow opens the door to talks with Europeans and with allies, with Biden, with many allies, and in counterpart, it uses papers of its military tensions to put pressure, and it actually is arguing this with its position today. Moscow.
I'm sorry to cut your train of thought, Mr. Ismail. I'm sorry to cut your train of thought, but Europe is threatening Russia of sanctions, among them blocking Nord Stream 2. Given the current situation and Europe's need for energy supply, can Europe really go ahead with this against Russia?
Today is living between a crisis from Washington, and today maybe Europe wants to keep its economic situation and its imports of gas, and its imports of gas are exceeding 40% from Russia to Europe. And it's also, Russia is considered as the first partner, commercial partner, and first importer to Europe, and also exports from Russia are the first exports and are the most important ones in Europe. And a possible invasion will stop the cooperation between Russia and Europe and Germany.
Mr. Ismail, you as an analyst within the international relations, do you think that this invasion will definitely occur, or this is just another political show of power between war's giants, another war, US and Russia?
الاقتصادية المتتبع لما تشهده هذه الأزمة أنه يرى بأن هناك
situation
من واشنطن
is
الذهاب إلى استبعاد
Washington wants to remove Russia as an economic partner to Europe and wants to and is finding excuses as sovereignty excuses. And it sees that the gas supplies are to the Ukrainian the Russian exports will be a loss for Ukraine, and Ukraine will not want the NATO to approach and it thinks that the factors will be intervening between geopolitical
Thank you so much,
factors.
Mr. Khalif. Mr. Ismail Khalfallah, thank you so much for joining me for this clarification. I really appreciate it. Now, within the same story, Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky on Monday declared that Wednesday will be a day of unity, and he addressed reports that a Russian invasion of the country could begin today. Usama Ayadi.
Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky called for a day of unity on February 16th, the day that the U.S. intelligence reportedly cited for a potential Russian invasion. In a video statement released on Monday, Zelensky also called on Ukraine's business and political elite to remain in his country, saying it was their direct duty in such a situation to be with the Ukrainian people.
We are being threatened by a big war, and a date of military invasion has been scheduled once again. It is not for the first time. A war is being conducted systematically against us on all fronts. On the military front, the military contingent has increased around our borders.
The last speech delivered by the Ukrainian president to the public came after a visit of the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz on a diplomatic mission to his country for further discussion in the concern of the Ukrainian crisis with Russia that has taken loads of plot twists.
Ich mache hier in Kiew noch einmal.
Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity are non-negotiable for Germany. We therefore expect Russia to take clear steps to de-escalate the current tensions. For Germany, it is clear that further military aggression against Ukraine would have serious political, economic and geostrategic consequences for Russia.
In the 2-hour-long meeting, Scholz promised more financial aid from Germany for Ukraine that NATO has considered urgent. Ukrainian president was urged to clarify Ukraine's position over his country joining NATO. Ukrainian ambassador to UK stated that his country is demanded to be more flexible in its decision to join NATO military alliance.
Also a member of NATO right now, and to avoid war we are ready for many concessions, and that's what we are doing in our conversations with Russians. But it has nothing to do with NATO, which is enshrined in the Constitution.
Moscow has expressed its position towards the fact of Ukraine military alliance with NATO and stated that the West did not take its military demands into consideration. However, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov showed his advice for Russian President Vladimir Putin to pursue the talks with the West to come to a fair solution.
Our possibilities aren't exhausted. Of course, security talks can't continue endlessly, but at this stage I would propose to continue and increase them.
Continuing peace talks over the Russia-Ukraine tension will surely be welcomed by German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, who is meeting Russian President Vladimir Putin, and another chance for the West to solve the crisis with diplomacy talks.
The United States announced on Monday it was closing its embassy in the capital city of Kiev out of fear for the safety of its diplomats, warning of an acceleration in the buildup of Russian forces over the Ukrainian border. Memzian.
The United States is closing the U.S. embassy in Kiev and temporarily relocating the remaining diplomatic personnel in the country to Lviv, a city in western Ukraine. According to reports, the State Department ordered the destruction of network and equipment and computer workstations, as well as the dismantling of its telephone system in the U.S. Embassy in Kiev. Fearing a Russian invasion, the U.S. pushed its nationals to leave Ukraine and ordered certain military troops and their families to leave the country. Similarly, the U.S. Embassy website published a number of advice for its nationals to escape Ukraine via land borders with Poland, Romania, Hungary, Slovakia, and Moldova. The White House and State Department maintained the U.S. position that Russia has exhibited no signs of de-escalation, as demanded by NATO members.
The path for diplomacy remains available if Russia chooses to engage constructively. However, we are clear-eyed about the prospects of that given the steps Russia is taking on the ground in plain sight.
We are basing our assessment on what we are seeing on the ground with our own eyes, which is a continued and unprovoked Russian buildup on the border with Ukraine and no accompanying evidence of de-escalation.
Russia, on the other hand, has denied any preparations to strike despite its large army deployment and has indicated that it is willing to continue discussions. Pentagon spokesman John Kirby stated that Putin might move with little to no warning and that an invasion would be met with heavy economic and diplomatic sanctions.
Real lives will be at risk. Ukrainian lives, to be sure, but also Russian lives. This will not be bloodless. This will not be easy.
President Biden talked with UK's Prime Minister Boris Johnson on Russia-Ukraine tensions and reiterated their support for Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity. In Belgium, Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin will meet with US partners to address Russia's military buildup.
The United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres said Monday that it was time to defuse tensions between Russia and the West over the Ukrainian situation, saying he was very concerned about the prospect of war. Guterres urged all parties to uphold the United Charter and avoid from threatening or using force against territorial integrity or political independence of any state.
Good afternoon. I am deeply worried by the heightened tensions and increased speculation about a potential military conflict in Europe. The price in human suffering, destruction and damage to European and global security is too high to contemplate. We simply cannot accept even the possibility of such a disastrous confrontation. I will remain fully engaged in the hours and days to come. I just spoke this morning with the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Russian Federation and of Ukraine. And my message is clear. There is no alternative to diplomacy. All issues, including the most intractable, can and must be addressed and resolved through diplomatic frameworks. It is my firm belief that this principle will prevail.
Reaffirming its strong commitment to the Ukrainian people, the Biden administration has offered an independent loan guarantee to Ukraine of up to $1 billion to support its economic reform agenda and continued engagement with the International Monetary Fund, IMF, amid Russia's military buildup. For the first time in Canadian history, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has used an emergency measure to give his administration extra power to respond to the continuous anti-government tracker protests. Islam Seed has more to clarify the situation.
Trudeau said he was appealing the Emergencies Act, which permits the federal government to implement extraordinary temporary measures for a period of 30 days during national emergencies, on news conference on Monday afternoon.
After discussing with Cabinet and caucus, after consultation with premiers from all provinces and territories, after speaking with opposition leaders, the federal government has invoked the Emergencies Act to supplement provincial and territorial capacity to address the blockades and occupations.
Anti-vaccine truckers and their backers descended on Ottawa last month to claim that Canada must withdraw its rule requiring truckers to be fully vaccinated against COVID-19 in order to pass the U.S. land border. If an emergency is proclaimed, the act takes effect immediately, but the government must seek approval from the Parliament within 7 days.
We see the Prime Minister talking about bringing in a national emergency declaration in terms of having the Emergencies Act put in place. That is an example of the failure of his leadership, the fact that it's taken so many weeks. And so I want to send a really clear message. We stand with healthcare workers. We stand with nurses. We stand with the truckers that have done their job throughout the pandemic to keep us fed and make sure that we have the goods that we need.
The Federal Royal Canadian Mounted Police announced earlier on Monday that 11 people had been arrested for blocking a border crossing Alberta's Western province after 3 days of protest in Ontario. Canada's most populous province, the Ambassador Bridge, reopened late Sunday.
Information was received that this group had access to a cache of firearms with a large quantity of ammunition. The group was said to have a willingness to use force against the police if any attempts were made to disrupt the blockade.
Ontario Premier Doug Ford also stated on Monday that the province will no longer provide vaccine passports starting from March 1st. However, the decision was not influenced by protests.
Europe employers and workers face heavy fines if caught in violation of Italy's new Super Green Pass rules. Italy's COVID-19 vaccination mandate for the over 50s kicks in today, Tuesday, 15 February, as the government ramps up the Super Green Pass rules for the unvaccinated. The compulsory vaccine mandate applies to everyone in Italy aged 50 or over, with unvaccinated workers to be suspended without a pay, and employees who go to work without Super Green Pass risking fines of between 600 and 1,500 euros. Super Green Pass is a reinforced version of the basic Green Pass and can only be obtained by those who have been vaccinated or recovered from COVID-19. Also, it is worth mentioning that the digital certificate is needed to access restaurants, bars, cinemas, theaters, nightclubs, stadiums, and public transport in all the states of Italy.
It's the right decision because last year we had about 800, 900 deaths every day. Now it's at least 10% of them. So I think it's a very, very good idea to do it.
This initiative is aimed both at protecting them, but also at reducing the pressure on hospitals.
Thousands of nurses and other healthcare workers marched along the streets in Australia's most populous state, Sydney, in a strike protesting against stagnant pay and staffing shortages. The demands include mandates, nurse-to-patient ratios, and a pay rise of higher than 2.5%. The strike comes despite an order by the state's Industrial Relations Commissions to call off the strike. The Omicron variant has held to a recent surge of cases, putting the country's testing and hospital systems under further strain.
Care for a COVID-19 patient was to extubate and allow them to peacefully die. I had their family on video conference and I assured them that she was not alone. And as they said their goodbyes, I was called away before she died.
A closed-door trial of Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny has begun inside a prison colony outside Moscow, hearing that human rights organizations are calling a fraud. On Tuesday, a video link showed Navalny wearing a jail uniform inside Pokrov's maximum security prison, according to the AFP news agency correspondent. Russia could extend Alexei Navalny's detention for up to a further 15 years in a fresh criminal trial that his supporters warn has been overshadowed by the crisis in Ukraine. On 16 December 2021, Super Typhoon Ray made its first landfall in Sigiriryo province before crossing several provinces by 18 December, after leaving the Philippine area of responsibility with a total of 9 landfalls. Super Typhoon Ray left significant devastation in many regions. Most of affected population are still in need of food supplies, potable water, and access to electricity and communications lines. Several reports also indicate that the lack of facilities such as operating rooms to accommodate extreme health emergency situations. Presidential election rally has been launched in South Korea, which is expected to elect a new leader for the country on March 9th amid inequality and corruption scandals. Islam Sid on what's follow.
The presidential campaign in South Korea officially began on Tuesday in what is likely to be the tightest race in 20 years. Lee Jae-myung, the head of the ruling Democratic Party, began his campaign at 12 a.m. by visiting Maritime Control Tower in Busan, the country's southeastern port city.
We picked the city of Busan, which will be the center of the southern capital, as the starting point to symbolize the growth of the economy for Koreans, and that we expand to the rest of the world through the sea and become a global leader.
According to Yonhap news agency, Lee's primary opponent, Yoon Suk-yeol of the Conservative People Power Party, began his campaign for office at the Seoul National Cemetery. According to polls, voters want a president who can deal with polarized politics and corruption, as well as a surge in house prices and increase in inequality.
This is the foggiest election we've seen in a while. It's very rare that a likely winner has to emerge just 3 weeks before the vote.
Among 14 candidates, Lee and Yoon are the favorites, with Yoon holding a tiny lead in recent opinion polls. The 9th March election will be the first to allow 18-year-olds to vote. People diagnosed with COVID-19 and those in quarantine will be able to vote after regular polls end, due to a wave of Omicron cases.
Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan visits the Turkish and Emirates Pavilion at Expo 2020 Dubai on the occasion of Turkey's National Day in his first official visit to the Emirates after nearly a decade of rivalry with this rich oil state, which is recently approached. During his visit, Erdogan said that countries should act together to achieve a brighter future. Speaking at the Expo, the Turkish president congratulated the UAE for successfully hosting the large-scale event despite the pandemic conditions.
As the main representative of the private sector in the United Arab Emirates, I am sure that you will fully understand the advantages of business partnerships and investments with Turkey. The will of statesmen is very important for relations between Turkey and the United Arab Emirates to reach the level they deserve. But it is you, the members of our business community, who will realize the potential of both countries, especially in trade and investment.
Inflation rates are still making population live a strapped financial situation as prices soared to record levels and impacted purchase capacity for Turks who are living numerous strikes despite the government's efforts to raise wages of workers. Osama Yadegan.
Inflation in Turkey has been very high, especially for the last 4 to 5 years. Prices have skyrocketed as the economy has deteriorated. Hundreds of protesters took to Turkey's Istanbul streets, rallying against price hikes and the ongoing economic crisis, as the economy currently suffers from surging inflation level of 48.7%.
We feel it. I have 3 kids and I'm having a hard time meeting the needs of my children.
In another notch of labor's belt, drivers at Turkish e-commerce giant Trendyol refused management's offer of an 11% pay hike, went on strike and won 38.8% wage increase. While 30% plus wage gains appear extremely impressive in many parts of the world, in Turkey they don't even keep up with the cost of living.
I bought a house and took out a loan, and I'm having difficulty in paying the installments.
The Turkish currency lost more than 40% of its value against the United States dollar last year, following successive central bank interest rate cuts championed by President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. According to the Labor Studies Group, at least 56 worker strikes broke out in Turkey between January 12th and February 10th. That compares to 84 strikes the government tracked between 2016 and 2020. The government raised the minimum wage at the start of this year by 50%, but that gain has been largely offset by the government's decision to switch to a graduated tariff system that substantially hikes prices for natural gas and electricity, a move that triggered protests in cities across the country.
A bomb attached to a bus carrying Syrian troops in Damascus exploded this morning, killing 1 soldier and wounding 11. State TV reported that the blast occurred during rush hour at customs roundabout near the capital's landmark on Umayyad Square. According to a report, it gave no further details. There were no immediate claim of responsibility. Ethiopia's parliament has voted for an early end to a 6-month state of emergency, declared last November when rebel Tigrayan forces were threatening to march on the capital. The lawmakers' decision came on Tuesday after a cabinet proposal last month about cutting short that state of emergency in light of improving security conditions in the country. French President Emmanuel Macron this week announced that French troops will be withdrawn from Mali and redeployed elsewhere in Sahel following a breakdown in ties with the country's military regime. Several security sources speaking on condition of anonymity said that Macron's announcements to an end 9-year French mission in Mali will coincide with European Union African Union summit in Brussels on Thursday and Friday. Mexico's president said Monday that the U.S. suspension on avocado imports and recent environmental complaints are part of conspiracy against his country by political or economic interests. He put forward the conspiracy theory after the U.S. suspended imports from Mexican avocados on the eve of the Super Bowl following a threat against U.S. plant safety inspector in Mexico. John Madden was memorialized in a public event at the Auckland Coliseum, the former home of Coach Madden's team, the Raiders, after his death in December. His widow Virginia honored him at the place where he first came of fame. The event was held at the Auckland Coliseum, roaming the sidelines for the Raiders. The first leg of the Champions League last 16 tie between Paris Saint-Germain and Real Madrid is set to take place at the Parc des Princes on today's evening. PSG coach Mauricio Pochettino is expected to have Neymar at his disposal following his return from injury, but the Brazilian forward is not likely to start alongside Kylian Mbappé and Lionel Messi in the forward line. Danilo will return to action, but Sergio Ramos is expected to miss out through this injury, while Andres Herrera is doubtful due to a knock. As for Real Madrid, their talisman Karim Benzema has missed the last 3 games through injury, and he is doubtful for the game in France. Ferland Mendy and Mariano Diaz could also miss out due to injuries, with coach Carlo Ancelotti expecting whether to take a risk by rushing back the 2 Frenchmen. Carlo Ancelotti addressed the media in Paris on Monday evening ahead of the first leg of the Real Madrid's Champions League tie with PSG. The Italian started by providing a general preview of the game, suggesting that it could be a quite predictable duel on tactical level.
We feel good and have all the confidence in the world. It'll be a difficult game against a very good opponent, one that hopes to go all the way to the final and win it. This is a match that could have been the final. The coaches need to put together a good plan. But these are 2 quite recognizable and similar teams, so it shouldn't be too difficult to put together a plan for me or for Pochettino. I don't think there will be anything special tactically. We need to have a complete performance.
Also, Karim Benzema appeared in the pre-match press conference and provided an update on his physical condition after missing the past 3 fixtures with hamstring injury, saying that he wouldn't confirm whether or not he will play this game.
I have been working very hard and I feel a lot better. We will see how I feel after training. I have been working in the mornings, afternoons and evenings in order to try to get back to play. I want to help my team in this huge match. But to be honest with you, I don't think there is over-dependence on me. The team has won matches without me too. I have done all I can to be here. And I have to be at 100% to play this game.
Ending up with the Champions League football game tonight, let's have a reminder for our main top stories. Some troops in Russia's military district adjacent to Ukraine are returning to their bases after completing drills. Russia's defense ministry said on Tuesday a move that could de-escalate frictions between Moscow and the West. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has declared February 16 as the Day of Unity, asking his country's people to lift the national flag and wear ribbons of the same blue and yellow colors on the day to show their unity to the world. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says he has invoked emergency powers to try to quell the protests by the truck drivers and others who have paralyzed Ottawa and blocked border crossings in anger over the country's COVID restriction. A public memorial took place in Auckland for the late John Madden, whose influence on the National Football League NFL is arguably unmatched, and his wife, Virginia Madden, spoke for about 7 minutes for her late husband's Auckland Coliseum memorial. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being with us. Our 24 news program is still rolling, so stay tuned. See you. Bye-bye.